All right, I'm showing it's 9:30. Okay, it's 9:30, folks. Good morning and welcome to the Peace River, Manasota Regional Water Supply Authority Board of Directors meeting of January 31st, 2020. Let the record show all commissioners are present. If you would please rise if you wish to participate in the invocation delivered this morning by Commissioner Elton Langford.
Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for a beautiful, wonderful day, Lord. We thank you for the rain that we got the other day, and Lord, we just thank you for bringing it to us. We needed it, and it's getting dry. But Lord, we just ask today that you would help us to conduct the business of this water supply authority to the best of the people that we serve, Lord, and that we can just make the best decisions and seek your wisdom and face in all the decisions that we make to do. Lord, protect our men and women that protect and serve us both here at home and across the water. Lord, just bring them home safe to their families and give them peace and comfort when they're away from their families. And Lord, we just ask all these things now in Jesus' holy name. Amen.
Amen. Please join in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, as we typically do, we're going to go around the room and ask you folks to introduce yourselves. We'll start over here.
Ann Lee, the authority staff.
Richard Anderson.
Mike Coates of the Water Supply.
Kevin Morris, also with the Water Authority.
Go ahead, sir. We'll go to the first row.
PRMRWSA, Black and Beach.
Jared Bickham, Charlotte County Capital Projects Manager.
Morning, Craig Rudy, Charlotte County Utilities Director.
Don Ross, Earth Balance.
Wade Multimeter, Earth Balance.
Tony Janeke right now.
Christine Weber with Stantec.
Tim Kramer, Stantec.
Gary Wantland, Stantec.
Mike Milet, Sarasota County.
Second row.
Terry Holcomb with Water Authority.
Chris Cussel with the Girl Group.
Michelle Martin from Public Risk Insurance Advisors.
Tiffany Mangold, Purvis Grain Company.
Katie Gilmore, Manatee County.
Mark Simpson, Manatee County.
Tim Ritchie, Marchie Ganson, Mosaic, and resident of Punta Gorda Isles.
Dave Tabasco, ESA.
Doug Robeson, ES.
Doug Ekman, TKW Consulting Engineers.
Adam Navy, TKW. Cameron Whitmore, Stantec. Bill Weber, Stantec.
Carlin O'Reilly, Stantec.
Ron Cavalieri, AECom. Tim Current with AECom.
Ford Ritz with the Authority.
Chris Tanner, Municipal.
Stephanie Ishii with Hazen and Sawyer.
I'm Erin Hunt with HDR.
Katie Duty with HDR.
Trudy Williams, TKW.
Ray Dennis, Stantec.
Gracie Anderson, Stantec.
I'm Mike Kennedy. I'm with the Stantec local office here in Sarasota.
Jared Park, Stantec.
Amber Halston with Earth
Paul Blazer with Stantec.
Jason Nadine with Stantec.
I'm Matthew Lippin with Stantec.
Julie Sullivan with ESA.
Sam Stone with the Authority.
Michael Beach, Black and Beach.
Bart Jones with Reese Engineering.
Eric Howard, Johnson Engineering. Good morning, Andy Vernon with Stantec.
Pat Luce with Stantec.
Alex Schmidt with Stantec.
I'm Bob Becker, Water Authority.
Amanda Marlowe with DeSoto County.
Robert Garcia, Water Authority.
Nick Aon, DNC.
Michael Zarzano, Charlotte County Congress, representing We the People.
Cynthia Compton, Charlotte Congress.
Michelle Tibbs, City of Northport.
Jennifer Grosser, City of Northport.
Richard LeBlanc, HDR.
Wendell Nelson, Peace River, also River.
Okay. Sounds like we got everybody.
Joseph Jones, Sarasota County.
Very good.
Ahmed Hersey, Water Management.
John Ferguson, Water Management District.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone, for attending this morning. Post remarks, Mr. Lehman, have anything to say?
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and a full packed house audience. It's a pleasure to welcome you here to the Peace River facility. Let's see. Over the course of a year, the board, you sit in commission chambers, you sit in meeting rooms, you discuss budgets, you discuss contracts, you talk about awarding a lot of money to a lot of infrastructure. We're glad to have you here today where the rubber meets the road, boots on the ground. Please take a look at what you've invested in, and I think you'll be as proud of it as we are. And so when you go back home, you can tell your constituents, where did my money go? Come and take a look. Over the course of a year, sometimes it seems like things don't get done, but when you look at over the past decade, might be better if I start at the beginning rather than the end, that a lot does happen. Utilities, it takes a long time, investment, a long time of construction. So let's take a look over the last 10 years. What's happened with our water supply? The reservoir last expansion was completed in 2009. Reservoir was completely filled in 2010. Over the last decade, you enjoyed a tremendous water supply. Good quality, no water restrictions due to droughts or dry seasons. You've done exactly what this authority is meant to be. You also completed the 91 rebuild of the Rainwater Treatment Facility to bring it up to par and actually expand it by 3 million gallons a day. You completed the construction of this facility, which is a training room, but even more importantly, a water quality lab next door to assure the safe drinking water. Maintenance facilities under construction out back. Please feel free to go take a look at that. That'll be a critical component as we expand and more needs for parts and inventory and maintenance. It becomes a critical factor to upkeep of the facility. Filter covers, we're in the process now. You've awarded the contract to cover the filters, but will also help increase water quality. Regional transmission system, 39 miles of large diameter pipe added to the regional system over the last decade. That's more than double what we started with. Some are still in construction. We also completed, or in the midst of the major water interconnect with the city of Punta Gorda. We put it in our strategic plan to extend out the region beyond just the members. The city of Punta Gorda has the largest water treatment plant in the 4 counties that is not a member of the authority. We are now interconnected and in partnership. $97 investment for those pipelines. And take a look at the breakdown. It's not a mistake that grant money exceeds what the authority funds are. We look at Swiftman as our continuing partner for 50% funding, but we've been successful in leveraging that funding through the state with the city of Punta Gorda. So we are actually well above the 50% to the benefit of your ratepayers. Financial security, we refinanced the 2005 bonds for financial savings. All 3 major rating agencies that put us in the AA category. This board has strengthened the budget policies. And of course, earlier last year, you had the acquisition of the Lakewood Ranch Administrative Office, providing permanency of the management of the authority. Proud to say that we're award-winning agency in operations, maintenance, management, and financial surety. And Richard's asked for a new trophy case out there. I'll gladly give him one as long as he keeps filling it up. Certainly planning for the future, that's where we're looking now. The strategic plan that this board revised in 2017, the integrated regional water supply master plan was in 2015 in the midst of being updated. You will see that in the upcoming board meetings. We implemented the 5-year capital improvements program with a 20-year capital needs assessment. We were very successful in implementing that project and making sure that we know ahead of time what our capital needs are. And of course, the biggest factor that you've accomplished, in my mind, is the 50-year water use permit that will provide the water surety well into future generations of this region. And certainly, what do you have to look forward to? The expansion of the regional reservoir number 3, that's in our top priority, and certainly must be in the top priority of a lot of people in the audience as we filled up today. But we're ready for the next decade. We start a new decade with a new reservoir. So it's my pleasure to welcome you here. Certainly take a look around, talk to the folks that work here, and we're ready to get to work. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Pat. It's good to reflect, Commissioners, on some of the things that have been accomplished. It really is amazing. It really is amazing. All right, we're going to go now to public comments. Anyone wishing to address the board in this portion of the meeting must fill out one of these cards. I've got one right now. There's a limit of 3 minutes per person. You can speak on any agenda issue this morning or any non-agenda issue. The 3 minutes will be strictly adhered to. I will try to give you a 30-second warning. I don't have a formal timer, but I've got Miss Rachel over there helping me out. So we'll look at that. Please make your comments to the board as a whole, not to individual members, and there will not be any discussion. We will attempt to, when we get into our comments, to maybe answer some of those questions later on. But we will not be having a discussion. The first is Michael Zarzano. He would like to speak to water pollution. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. My name is Michael Zarzano. I represent Charlotte County Congress. It is an organized voice of we the people in Charlotte County. Happy talk time is over. The reality is we have a big problem in Southwest Florida. It's called water pollution. And in 1928, the federal government came here to help us. After the hurricane destroyed and killed a lot of people, 2,500, the federal government thought they were going to change the God's plan of natural drainage and dam up Lake Okeechobee. You know, we opened this meeting up with a prayer to the God of creation. And when he created this state, he made a natural flow that led into Okeechobee. This narrow state has in the middle of it a waterway, a historic, pristine waterway that God created. And it empties into Okeechobee, and when it gets overflowing, it is supposed to drain south of Okeechobee. That's the way God planned for the state of Florida. The same God that we opened this meeting up with. But we, the government, in 1929-28, decided to change God's method and dam up Lake Okeechobee. And now we're emptying out all the pollution from all the golf courses and phosphate mining, thanks to Mosaic. That's the elephant in the room that most people don't like to talk about. That's the elephant in the room that's putting fear in small businesses and farmers. They're afraid to talk about Mosaic for fear of retribution. But the time has come for not these few men to decide what happens in Florida. It's time that we, the people, who are the master of government, decide who allows pollution to continue and who doesn't. We, the people, need to vote in a referendum, and that is the message here today. No longer should these people at this board decide whether or not Mosaic pollutes 75 million gallons of wastewater into the pristine Peace River.
You have 30 seconds, sir.
But it's we, the people, that need to decide in a referendum. It's either a government of, by, and for the people, or it's a government of dictators and corporations. I think our founding fathers made that decision clear when they fought against the corporation called the British East India Company, and they threw their stinking tea in the river. That's what we need to do. We need to vote and stop the pollution in Florida.
Your time is up, sir.
With a referendum in 2020.
Thank you, sir. Your time is up. Thank you. Next, we have Tom Ritchie, who would like to speak to Mosaic phosphate mining on the Peace River. Good morning, sir.
Good. is Tim Ritchie. And I have been investigating and documenting mosaic phosphate mining since July 24th of 2018. On November 29th of 2018, I was so disturbed by what I had been reading, I got up in an airplane. On that day, I photographed a 6-inch wide crack that was 100 feet long. This is the Mosaic Bartow South Gyp Stack. Most everybody in Florida has no idea what Mosaic Fertilizer, LLC, really is. These are a list of some of the toxins they use. Ammonia, sodium hydroxide, fluorosilic acid. That burns through everything. 2016, August, the New Wales sinkhole. There have been numerous reports in the local Sun newspaper by Betsy Calvert about the Mosaic Bartow South Gyp Stack leaking since October. Now I want you all to know this. I have their failed water test. 18 of those monitoring wells around the Bartow South Gyp Stack are way past contaminated. And then when they say they did a dye test and no dye was able to be found, I asked a 10-year-old where he thought it went. He said, "Sir, down." I am very concerned about Mosaic. We have the Mosaic Green Bay Gyp Stack, 10 minutes from the Mosaic Bartow South Gyp Stack. It is responsible for part of the $1.8 billion environmental fine. That is billion. They have paid off everyone. They have given donations to everyone. And I am a resident of Punta Gorda Isles. And I am the founder and leader of March Against Mosaic. And my first march I had on December 1st, Saturday of 2018. 455 people were on our bridge.
Mr. Ritchie, you have 30 seconds, sir.
Over 20,000 views on Facebook with reporter Chris Grisby. We do not need any more collaboration or testing with Mosaic. I would like to thank all of you always for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, I have no additional cards. We're going to, as a result, move on to the resolutions and presentations.
You're first up.
Well, yes, we're going to recognize Commissioner Langford. I don't know if I have anything, Pat. It'd be nice. For your service as our chairman, sir, for the last year. You've done an outstanding job and really appreciate all you've done. So on behalf of the Water Authority, present an appreciation. Elton Langford, Chairman of the Board, 2019.
Thank you, sir.
And I discovered, or we discovered, I guess, that guess what? We forgot the previous chairman.
Was it because the previous chairman did a really bad job?
No.
Let's get that out in the open.
Just forgot. So, in appreciation, sir, for your 2 years in 2017 and 2018 as chairman, we want to present this to you.
Thank you.
We had to scratch off for 1 year and put 2. That's what happened.
That's what took some time.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for both of you.
Yeah, well, thank y'all. Appreciate it very much.
Perfect. Okay, Mr. Lehman, you're, well, it's going to take employee recognition.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Richard Anderson of your staff for the record. As always, we love these types of events here so we can recognize staff, the ones that really do the work, keeping this place running and making the water for us every day. So I have 3 staff that I want to recognize, and Pat has one follow-up. But first, we have our 10-year service award. We have Alphonse Brackens. So Al, would you want to come up? Should we do that? Would the board mind coming up front as well, so we can take some photos? And then Al actually brought his wife. I don't know if she's inclined to come up as well here. You're welcome to, or you can stay back there. Amanda is here as well.
Go ahead, I'll take pictures.
You'll take pictures. Okay. So just 2 minutes about Al real quick. Al started here as a utility worker 10 years ago. Worked his way up. He's passed his Class C operator license. He's one of our most experienced and conscientious operators that we have here at the plant. Born and raised in Fort Lauderdale. Now a resident of Arcadia. Don't know how that worked out. But got 5 children, 2 daughters and 3 sons. That keeps him busy at home, and he's a big Dolphins fan. And one interesting fact about Al, this happened before I got here, but he's such a dedicated employee. His car broke down one day, and he took a cab to get to work so he wouldn't miss his shift. So just want to recognize that. That takes dedication, and we appreciate that. And thank you for all your service, Al. Nice, I gave you the plaque, right? There you go. Yeah, would you mind?
Come on over. Congratulations.
It's just a little for me, sorry. Thank you, perfect. Great, thank you.
Congratulations.
Next up, we have Vondell Nelson. Vondell, come on up if you would. Vondell was born and raised in Guyana, in South Africa. Or South America, I'm sorry. And before immigrating to the U.S., he was a social studies, math, and science teacher for 4th graders. So when I heard that, I knew he would fit in perfectly with the utility mentality around here. He can relate to all of us. So he's done a great job. He's got 4 kids, ages of 8 to 21. He enjoys music, cars. He's got a very nice car, and family time. He also started as an operator trainee, worked his way up. He's got his Class C license. Currently working on his Class B, and just one of the smart operators we have around here. A very quick learner. For 5 years, he knows the plant very well, and he does a great job for us all the time. So thank you for your support. You gotta hold that out like a fish.
Perfect, thank you.
Congratulations.
Dying to get out of here. And last up for me is Robert Garcia. Robert's here. Thank you. Robert was born and raised in Ohio, moved here with his family, and settled here in Port Charlotte, I think, correct? Robert worked for the contractor that was part of the 91 rebuild, and he saw what a great time we have here as employees, and he applied and came to work for us here 5 years ago, and has done a great job. He started as a utility worker, now he works at the filter press, and does a great job handling most of all the routine maintenance there, and does a great job keeping the place running for us. In his past life, he was a top motocross racer, outdoor motocross. So competing back in the 90s and early 80s or early 2000s with some of the top names in the sport back then. And now he's training his son to follow in his footsteps. So he's got an 8-year-old son, training him to race, and really enjoys that. Also, you have an 18-year-old daughter who's in the Air Force, and I'm very proud of her. So congrats, and thank you for all your service. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Congratulations.
One more.
All right, we have one more on the list, Ann Lee. When I saw her name on the list, man, time flies. 5 years here already, but it's been a real pleasure. She's had a struggle because she came in with all these older people, and she's taken us to a lot more electronic, paperless agency now, so it's been quite a learning phase. I also tell Commissioner Langford that she is my iPhone expert, so if you have any issues, feel free to call on her. But now it's been a real pleasure with Ann, and not only she pulled us into the modern world of electronics, she's got us into captors, and you'll hear that today. I never knew anybody could get that excited about a captor, but she does. But she's also gotten into the water industry and very active with the American Water Works Association. I'm proud to say she's the regional section chair. You know, we told her that doesn't take much. She found out differently once she volunteered for it, but we're really proud of her. So, Ann, congratulations. And I put also in your board book, there have been a number of awards for public relations and public education that Honey Rand obtained through our campaign with Otter Save Water last year for conservation and also Drinking Water Week. And I handed out also too, she recently published in the American Water Works Journal quite the historical perspective on this authority. It's quite different than the other authorities in the state that have water wars. It's all about how we started back in 1981, as a matter of fact, almost 50 years, 40 years. So, and this agency has always provided a platform for discussion. I think Commissioner Chappie, I always remembered, he always was famous for saying this agency is for cussing and discussing, but you always get things done, so that's what counts. Anyway, we're very proud of the achievements and the awards that come with it.
It is really an amazing history. Most think about 1991, Pat, but 81 when they got together and actually formed it. Was part of that originally too?
For a year, yes.
For a year, yeah. Very interesting. Okay. Thank you very much. We're now at the consent agenda. We'll see if anybody wants to pull anything. Commissioner Trigg?
No.
Commissioner Langford?
No, sir.
Commissioner Mayo?
No, sir.
I don't have anything either.
Move we approve the consent agenda?
Second.
Motion second to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Hearing none, passes unanimously. Okay, we're on to regular. Okay. Water supply conditions. Mr. Anderson.
There we go. Good morning again, Mr. Chair, board members, Richard Anderson of your staff. As usual, I'm going to hit the highlights of the water supply conditions here for December and January. Rainfall, as Commissioner Langford alluded to, we got a little bit on Wednesday. Haven't gotten a lot of rainfall, but we've had just enough to keep the river flowing and keep water available for us to withdraw here at the facility. Through January, we actually only had about a half an inch of rain, but with November, December combined, about 5 inches of rain. So, as I said, just enough to keep us going. Here's the river flow situation. As you can see, we're at about 500 CFS as of the 15th. That's dropped since then. We're down to about 250 CFS. Still about twice what our permitted quantity is there, the red line of 130. So gives us about 20 million gallons a day as of today available to take off the river. The river withdrawals, as you can see, the average withdrawal for January is about 30 MGD, about what we're using. Same for December, about 32 MGD. So we're basically in a maintenance mode. As you'll see in a second, the reservoirs are still full and we're in very good shape. Surface water storage, this is the reservoir 1 and 2 combined storage. As you can see, the blue line is permitted full and we're right there at the line. We're basically full at 6.8 billion gallons combined in the surface water system. The ASR system, as you've seen in the last couple of meetings, we're still in storage mode. Haven't had to take anything out of that system, obviously, and we don't expect to this spring because of the reservoir still being full at this point, and we don't see any reason why we will need to use ASR. We should be able to use the surface water system to get through until the rainy season. Days of supply, as you can see, the red bar is the days of supply based on our allocations to you, the customers, 34.7. We have, sorry about that, have about 11 months at the allocation quantity, about 340 days. If you look at it on an average day delivery, we have about 15 months of supply on hand right now, counting the ASR system and the surface water system. Now if we switch to the regional production, y'all's usage here for the month of December, the authority delivered 27.6 MGD. York County and city facilities delivered about 46 MGD, totaling about 51.5 million gallons for the month. Of that, again, as usual, 3.5 went to the non-authority customers served by the county, leaving about 68 MGD used by the authority customers. Charlotte County used about 10.6 from the authority, about 500,000 from their facility at First Store, total about 11 MGD, which is 57% of your allocation. Manasota County used 460,000 a day from the authority and 290,000 from your system out there at the correctional facility, total 0.75 average. It's about 53% of your capacity. And Manatee County, self-supplied 33 to your customers, exported another 4.5 to Sarasota, and 3.5 to your consecutives in the county, totaling 41 MGD delivered, which is about 79% of your permitted capacity. Only 63% is being used if you look at strictly your service to your own customers there in the county. And Sarasota County in December used 100% of your allocation, 15.04, imported 4.7, which includes Manatee County and a little bit from the city of Northport, and self-supplied about 0.8 MGD. And that, as you know, is due to the construction going on at the Carlton facility, and that seems to be working very well. We have no issues delivering water at this point, so that seems to be working great, and we'll continue to supply through the dry season. And the city of Northport for December, about 1.5 million a day from the authority and 1.2 from their facilities. Again, they gave about 200,000 a day to Sarasota County, a total of 2.6, or 42% of your permitted capacity. And looking at the big picture, as you can see, the last blue line to the right is through September 2019. That's the water year, 71.4. This includes through December, so this is the rolling average, December to December, up about 1.5 million gallons in the 3 months. So we've had a little bit of a dry spell, and water usage looks to be up right now, so that's a good thing. And utilization, as you can see, 71.5 used in the region, leaving 33.1 available. It's about 2/3 utilization, 68%, and with the bulk of that being delivered by the authority in Manatee County. So, with that, be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments, Mr. Anderson? Just one thing on the 15 months of storage. The ASR, of course, shows that, what, 8.63 total. The usable is about 5, right? 5 billion?
Correct.
So is that based on, the 15 months based on the 5?
The 15 months is based on the usable quantity of 5 MGD.
Good deal.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Very good. Okay, we'll go to the second item. FY 2019 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report and Independent Auditor's Report. Ms. Lee.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, and Lee of the authority staff. Myself, in conjunction with Ms. Tiffany Mangold from Purvis Gray & Company, will be presenting on the FY19 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report and Independent Auditor's Report. At the authority, we are continually striving to elevate our standards, and as such, for fiscal year 18, we chose to present our financials as part of a comprehensive annual financial report, commonly known as a CAFR. This CAFR was submitted to GFOA's Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting Program, and I am pleased to say our report obtained the Certificate of Achievement. With board approval, it is our intent to submit the fiscal year 19 comprehensive annual financial report to the program, as we believe the report continues to meet the program's requirements. Over the following few slides, I will review the financial highlights and statements found within the CAFR. Please keep in mind that these statements are being presented in draft form, pending adjustments pertaining to the GASB 68, which is the net pension liability statement. The figures presented in red are those which will be affected by this statement, and these summary statements may be found within the MD&A portion of the CAFR, beginning on page 24. The statement of net position is prepared using the accrual method of accounting and presents all the same information as a balance sheet. It assesses the balance of the government's assets against its liabilities. For fiscal year 19, the authority's assets and deferred outflows of resources exceeded its liabilities and deferred inflows of resources by $125,620,249, which is our net position. 77.3% of this net position represents the net investment in capital assets. In other words, it's the investment in capital assets net of related debt. The statement of revenues, expenses, and net fund position presents all the same information as an income or profit and loss statement. In regards to revenues, from 2018 to 2019, charges for service increased by 2.3%, and operating grants and contributions increased by 7.36%. Capital grants and contributions net in 2019, which includes capital grants from the DEP and SWIFT-MUN towards the Phase 1 and Phase 3B pipeline, increased by just under $2.8 million. In terms of expenses, the cost of sales and service increased by 6.3% from 2018 to 2019. This increase was due to several large dollar value projects that were not depreciable, such as the dredging project, as well as increased labor and chemical costs, which were partially offset by decreased engineering and environmental service costs. The administration costs increased by 8.8%, which is primarily attributed to the issuance costs associated with the 2019 note. As of September 30, 2019, the authority's investment in capital assets was over $245 million. This investment in capital assets includes land, easements, buildings, structures, improvements, furniture, equipment, and construction in progress. For 2019, we had capital additions totaling a little over $9.7 million, depreciation expense of $12.492 million, for a net decrease in capital assets of $3.8 million. The authority's total bonded debt outstanding for 2019 totaled just over $141 million. These bonds are secured by the net revenues pledged as a master water supply contract. For 2019, the long-term debt decreased by $800,000, primarily due to $2.8 million of scheduled principal payments, which were mostly offset by the $2 million addition from the 2019 bank note. Under the authority's budgetary process, rates are established to provide adequate cover for existing and planned additional debt. This is demonstrated by the authority's debt service coverage and county debt service coverage ratios, which are indicators of the authority's financial strength. As indicated by the table, the authority continually maintains coverage ratios well above our requirements. With that, I'd like to introduce Tiffany Mangold, CPA, with Purvis Gray & Company, who will be reviewing the independent auditor's report.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Once again, I'm Tiffany Mangold, Senior Audit Manager with Purvis Gray & Company. We are your external auditors, and it's our responsibility to express an opinion on your financial statements based on our audit. First, I'd like to congratulate you on receiving the GFOA's Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. Its attainment represents the highest standards, the highest reporting requirement that you can receive for governmental accounting and financial reporting. And it's a significant accomplishment by a government and its management. As I know, you're striving to receive the same award in 2019, I'll start by going over our audit opinion. We've issued a clean audit opinion and an unmodified opinion, and that's essentially the highest level of opinion you can receive from an audit. This means that your financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects. We do not issue an opinion on your management's discussion and analysis, your introductory section of your CAFR, or the statistical section. We noted no instances of fraud or illegal acts throughout the year. We had no significant changes to our planned scope or approach during our year-end field work. Some favorable audit conclusions are that there were no changes in the accounting policies noted. There was a new standard this year that took place, GASB 83 for asset retirement obligations. The statement addresses accounting and financial reporting for certain asset retirement obligations, which are legally enforceable liabilities associated with the retirement of a tangible asset. And management has determined that the authority does not have any of these asset retirement obligations, so your statements were not affected with this new statement, new standard that came into effect. Some favorable audit conclusions are that there were no significant or unusual transactions noted throughout the year. There was no alternative accounting methods discussed with management. And we consider management's communication with those charged with governance to be in line with best practices. As you know, you received extra funding this year from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection for state grants, and because that exceeded $750,000, you're required to have a single audit performed as well. In this case, we check your compliance with the major state project and everything that's required in the grant. So there was only one major state project this year, and we had to add certain items to your packets because of it. So you have an independent auditor's report on compliance for each major state project and on the internal control over the compliance, the schedule of expenditures with state financial assistance, notes to that schedule, and a schedule of findings and question costs, of which there were none. So we issued an opinion on this major state project that the authority complied in all material respects with the types of compliance requirements that had a direct or material effect on the state project. So once again, a clean opinion on that. Some required communications to those charged with governance is that there were no adjustments detected throughout the audit, meaning that you can rely on your financial statements that you received throughout the year and they're fairly stated. There were no past adjustments other than other post-employment benefits, which management has determined that that's not material to the financial statements and not required to be included as a past adjustment. The financial statement disclosures are neutral, consistent, and clear. We had no disagreements with management, and there were no difficulties encountered throughout the audit. So we hope that you will receive that CAFR award once again, and I got just as excited as Ms. Lee when she received it. So congratulations again on that. That's a very big accomplishment. And with that, I'd like to thank Mr. Lehman and Ms. Lee and their staff and for helping to make this a smooth audit process. And we have a motion.
Yep, we need it. And with that, we'll take any questions from the board.
Thank you very much. Good update, good report. Commissioners, any questions or comments? These two ladies. If none, Chair would entertain a motion for item 2 as motion as recommended by staff.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
We have a motion second to approve item 2 per the motion recommended by staff. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
if
sir.
I may. You know, I've been here 5 years. I came about the same time as Ann, and I used to attend the meetings before that, and I've always been impressed by all of our employees and all of management. But poor Ann gets the brunt of my questions as an accountant. And I just, for the record, my intent here is to embarrass Ann. For the record, Ann is an absolute joy to work with.
Yes, sir. I would agree.
Pleasure's all mine.
Okay, any additional discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 3, Mr. Lehman, you're on.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I think as I presented in the opening welcome, that we have proven the value of the reservoir over the last decade, and that it has met the water needs of your residents. And then now we embark on what will be the legacy of this board to provide water for the future generations, and that being the next reservoir number 3. As part of that project, the request for statement of qualifications from consultants was issued to provide professional design and engineering services for the feasibility, siting, design, permitting, and construction management for the next reservoir. The project was properly advertised and 3 proposals were received. The scope of services that I laid out, I basically referred to as the cradle to grave type project services, starting at the very beginning all the way through construction and compliance. This could be up to a 10-year time frame, as this is a mega project of great value, both in dollar amount and value of water to this authority. Professional Services Evaluation Committee was established according with authority's policies, and those SOQs were evaluated. The committee determined all 3 firms were deemed qualified, and subsequently they were all interviewed by the committee. The committee was split on the ranking of the top 2 firms with Stantec. There was a 5-member committee. The top 2 firms with Stantec receiving 3 votes for first place and HDR with 2 votes for first place. Pretty much a split vote. The committee was unanimous in ranking Gannett Fleming as the 3rd rank, so that one was a clear cut. In accordance with the procurement policy, the committee submitted the ranked shortlist of executive director for consideration in accordance with the authority's procurement policy. I've reviewed the submittals and ranking by the committee. The board policy authorizes the executive director to present the ranked shortlist to the authority board for consideration and approval for contract negotiations. And per the memo that I submitted to the board, and it's in the board book, that as a result of the split decision closest to the ranking of the committee, I, as executive director, recommend that the board take the opportunity to hear from the top 2 firms prior to making the decision on the ranked shortlist. As I said, this is a long, involved mega project that will require public funds greater than any other project we've done. And it will be long-term, entail many multi-year effort that will include the feasibility, design, permitting, mitigation, construction, and compliance upon completion. Communication and coordination with the consultant at the board, administrative level, the staff level, and with our partnering funding agencies, SWIFMUD, state DEP, others, will be critical in the decision-making throughout the project to assure that it's successful in the end. You, the board, ultimately have all the powers and privileges invested in the authority and are responsible for the criticalness of the project, and you deserve the chance to get all the information and evaluate the information for yourself prior to making a decision that will impact the authority for decades to come. Presentations from Stantec and HDR, if the board wishes, can be scheduled for the next board meeting, which will be held in the Sarasota chambers. Copies of those submittals will be submitted to you for review prior to that. And then the parameters in accordance with the purchasing policy as laid out will be presented to you, which includes competency, experience, repeat business, past record, et cetera, but that will be all laid out specifically so you know what the evaluation criteria is. We as staff can lay out the parameters so that everybody's on the same playing field. So, Mr. Chairman, I present this as my recommendation for discussion by the board that you entertain presentations of the top 2 ranked firms at the next board.
Very good. Commissioners, when I had my pre-agenda meeting with Mr. Lehman and Mr. Coates, the way I understood it, it stood at these 2 firms, both great firms, both qualified firms, were basically put at an even place. And then the presentations to us would be the determining factor. Well, I was a little uncomfortable with that. I've gone through probably 3 or 4 decades of doing presentations, and that kind of methodology I had a little concern over because there's only 4 of us. We could end up with a dead heat. And this project's so important. We're looking at a $200 million project. Can't flip a coin. something like this. That has happened. We could, actually.
No, I was saying that was written out of your procurement policy.
Has it
So
gone
there is
away
no
now?
coin flip anymore.
But it has happened.
It has happened. It was in the old procurement policy.
Yeah.
But in the new one, there is no provision for flipping a coin.
So I suggested to Mr. Lehman that let's go back and take the matrix that was developed by the committee and provide that to the board. I haven't seen it, but it exists. And there's a scoring matrix that typically most communities use. I'm sure the categories are very similar to what we all use. And let's have that available to us. And then we start off with that information being factored into the decision. We do the interview. I'm okay with the interviews. It's a very important project. But then the interviews aren't the whole thing. It's maybe we could decide on some methodology. I don't know. I suggested there could be more weight given maybe to the proposal than to the interview. Interviews sometimes can be tricky. I've been there. Won some on interviews and lost some on interviews. So a lot of work goes into the proposal, as you know, Commissioner.
Yes.
So basically, that's, I think, what we discussed. First of all, do we want to interview? And then do we want to slightly alter the methodology or take the information that's been created so far and factor that into the decision-making process? That's kind of where I'm sitting. Any thoughts?
Just from a legal perspective, the idea of reviewing the proposals prior to the interview is always a good idea for any decision-making process. And because of the importance of this project, we just felt that the board should be involved in this and review the proposals, like you were saying, and look at the way that the proposal was set up from the standpoint of what areas you factor in. But ultimately, in a decision of this importance, staff and I felt more comfortable that you all would make that ultimate decision. And that ultimate decision is simply the selection of who is number 1 and 2 in the ranking to begin that contract negotiation. So I agree with everything you said, Commissioner, and all that follows our procurement policy and the specific specifications of this proposal that was put out. So, but to move forward, if that's the board's desire, I need a motion for you to receive the presentations from the first and second ranked companies, which are Stantec and HDR, for selection at our next meeting.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
A motion is second to authorize the presentations at our next board meeting. Does that also include, again, factoring in the scoring, not just scoring from the presentations, but when we decide to do our ranking number one, number 2, we would factor in the presentation information?
That's correct.
Very good. We have a motion is second. Is that everybody comfortable with that motion?
Mr. Chairman, if
Yes,
I
sir.
may. I don't have, I think I only have about 2 decades worth of experience, but I'm younger than you, so.
A little bit.
I have to tell you that I see staff's wishes, and I'll support the motion. But I want to be absolutely sure, having been deeply involved in this sort of thing in my old life, that we adhere to what has always been the authority's protocol, that when we get to presentations, and you said they'll be in the Sarasota chambers, that the group not presenting is asked to leave the room, so they don't use things they picked up in the first group's presentation to enhance theirs. I just want to see an absolute, and I'm sure we will, and I'm sure we always have, absolute conformance to that. There is nothing more important than this project, which we've programmed in for 10 years and $200 million. So I would just ask that. Probably didn't need to be said, but I felt I wanted to say it. And we still would adhere to all the normal protocols of selection and begin the negotiation with the first ranked firm. And should we not achieve success, move to the second ranked firm.
Go ahead.
I was just saying that's the same method that was utilized in front of the committee of the ranking, and I would expect it's the same method we've used on every one of these processes. So yes, I think we'll go forward. That would be the process we continue to use unless you as a board voted to change them.
I support everything you said, sir. I mean, my experience has been, there might have been one occasion where competitors stayed in because of the law. Legally, I think they could be, but from a professional ethics standpoint, they usually everybody exited, and I made sure that the speakers are turned off in the halls too. You know, so.
Pat, you're going to have to remind Sarasota of that because we have monitors in the hallways.
Okay, we have a motion second to approve the process as on item number 3 as recommended by Mr. Manson. Any additional discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Hearing none, passes unanimously. Okay, Commissioners, we are now at the place we're going to break. We're going to recess the regular meeting here and go to workshop. Anybody need a break for a few minutes? Or a 5-minute break would be a blessing for me too, sir. So we'll be in recess for 5 minutes.
Good morning once again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. It's our pleasure to have a workshop. It's budget time again, as it is everywhere. We have some major issues we want to talk about, present to you some of the information today, so that we can have future discussion at our next board meeting, and then move into the tentative budget and final budget appropriation. Certainly, we do our budgets in accordance with our mission and vision for the authority. The calendar itself, we are here today, January 31st, with the board workshop to have discussion on the major issues. And then we have the budget calendar. At the next board meeting, March 30th, we'll talk about the R&R efficiency study. You'll hear a little bit about today, but you'll be presented with that actual study at the next board meeting, so we can implement that into the tentative budget. You'll also, at the next board meeting, hear the 5-year CIP and 20-year needs that can be incorporated in the budget. And some of the other budget issues that we'll have discussions with you today to be incorporated in the tentative budget. The tentative budget being presented to you on May 27th. I know our documents have it by May 15th. In prior years, now that we meet every other month, we have been letting that go till the May board meeting. So with your discretion, we'll go ahead and keep that tight schedule. With the public meeting then scheduled for final approval on August 5th. Certainly the budget is very transparent, including authority staff, your member staff, member administration, your member boards, and external agencies, specifically SWIFLIN in particular is one of our primary agencies, and certainly the public. All the information will be posted on our website, as we have in past years. We have many documents that we refer to. Certainly we have the federal regulations for drinking water standards, Florida statutes that we have to comply with, obviously. The authority governance documents, the master water supply contract, and we do have the bond documents that you'll hear a little bit more today that we have the covenants and the bond documents that we're here to. And the board policies that you'll hear a little bit more about today too. Guidelines and procedures, and certainly good standard general practice for water utilities. Just to remind you as to how the water pie is split up for the authority through the master water supply contract. You see that Sarasota and Charlotte counties are fairly equal players as we exist today, with Northport having a 2.8 MGD and DeSoto County having a smaller segment of it. Looking historically at the base rate charges, it has increased a little 1.5% to 2% a year when you look at it over the last 5 years, which is, remember, looking at Richard's water demand scenarios over the last 5 years, it pretty much mimics the increase in water supply with the increase in cost. We certainly want to try to adhere to a similar pattern into the future. Looking at the water use charges as the actual charges per 1,000 gallons, you can see that over a number of years we held that steady. Last year was a small increase. So what are the budget issues that we want to present to you today and have discussions? We do have a rate model to project revenues and expenditures. We have our consultant Stantec to present that model to you. And why do we use the model? Because we need the fiscal sustainability. We want to certainly maintain our bond rating in the AA category. And we want water rates, not just for next year, but we want to look at the near term of 2 to 5 years and even long term. How are those water rates going to project out so you don't get rate shock at any given year? We also need to start planning for the debt reallocation for 2022 and 2028. What do I mean by that? This facility, the bonds, our indebtedness to Charlotte County is paid off October 1, 2021. That will make a big difference in our base rate charges. In 2028, we will pay off the 1998 debt that paid for the Peace River option expansion. How does that impact you as our customers? How does your debt internal to your utility, how does that fit together? Since looking at Sarasota County, I think the Carlton debt, I think might be paid off in 2021. So what does that mean as we build a reservoir and have different debt services? How do they fit together? Charlotte County, payoff of the 1991 acquisition by GDU. How is that going to fit in the same way with DeSoto County? But task and to meet individually with all your financial people so that you get coordinated as far as the authority and your individual counties. Bottom line, how does that impact your end user, ratepayer, connection fees? And then all that will be put together through collegially here as the authority. So that is a major task looking at the future. Prioritizing funding for infrastructure. We're doing an R&R efficiency study, which you'll hear a little bit more about. As we sit here today, I was reminded that this facility was built 40 years ago. In 1980, it was first put into service. If you look at the service life of 30 years, it should have crumbled apart 10 years ago. But it hasn't, because we have R&R. So how do we make sure we have the proper R&R sufficiency for the future and plug that into the budget? You'll also hear about the cooperative funding projects for Swiftwood and how this is Ward 1 funding, and also the potential for an emergency disaster relief reserve. A reserve in case of a hurricane or any other natural disaster. We have, as I think many of you have learned, that dealing with FEMA isn't the easiest thing in the world. So there may be a price to pay, and should we have a reserve to pay that? And then certainly looking into the future, the planning for long-term water demands and results of this authority, updating the 5-year CIP and 20-year needs as we talked about earlier, and then providing CIP funding for future projects. Those are all big dollar amounts and tasks for this authority. And today our intent is to provide information, the tools we have to try to find solutions to it. So with that, I'll turn it over to Stantec and let them present to you the rate model.
Thanks, Pat. Real quick, my name's Amy Burnham with Stantec. This is Pat Luce. We're actually going to go interactive for a little bit, so we'll get out of the presentation environment and actually show you the tools and models that have been provided for the authority and been used for a number of years. Actually goes back to probably the early 2000s. And these tools are great ways to amplify and look at these types of issues and priorities, and so that you can have, as staff, as decision makers for the authority, the ability to understand the consequences, both near-term and long-term, of your different alternatives and how that affects your financial performance, your key targets in terms of reserves, debt coverage ratios, but also the actual impacts to the base charges and volumetric rates that each of your respective agencies in turn have to contribute to the authority to meet those requirements. And a couple of the key features of the modeling system are the ability to change capital projects as well as funding sources really on the spot. And so through interactive work sessions in this budget process, we explore those possibilities with your staff to develop and evaluate financial consequences of different funding sources or impacts they might have. So Pat, if you wouldn't mind, maybe we could just pull up the model real quick and walk through a couple of examples of how this tool is going to be used in the budget process to integrate your capital needs. So as Pat's getting this open here, there's a fair amount visually, and I apologize for kind of the washout on the main screen. It's probably easier to see on some of the electronic displays, but this is really a cash flow model that simulates your financial dynamics for the authority over a multi-year period. We're showing 10 years, but it actually goes out even beyond that so that we can integrate your long-term capital planning needs and also your existing debt requirements over their full terms. And so we're looking at the top line, if you just want to highlight with your cursor, Pat, the water usage charge, the variable rate per 1,000 gallons each year. And that's calculated very specifically based upon demands that we can adjust in the model, as well as forecasted operations and maintenance expenses for chemicals, electricity, all the components that go into your variable rate. And then the next section down shows by year what the base charges are for each of the members and customers of the authority. So for Charlotte, DeSoto, Sarasota, Northport, and Manatee, what that base charge is on a monthly basis in thousands of dollars. And Pat, if you highlight 2022, I think it is, you can actually see the significant impact to a couple of those base charges associated with, Pat mentioned, the expiration of debt to Charlotte charge, And if you look out into 2028, 2029, you'll actually see again some changes to those base charges, largely associated with that change in the debt, the payment of the refinanced original 91 facility bonds. And so you can see how those change over time. A key performance indicator that's shown right below those base charges is the rate covenant test. So Pat, if you just highlight that for me as well. So that's a key ratio that we want to make sure that we have a ratio of our net income, our gross revenues minus operating expenses, that's at least 1.5 times our annual principal and interest payments on our debt. And that's a policy that the board should be well familiar with. We try to boil some key things up graphically on this control panel as well. So you can see on the top left graph your operating fund balance and how that's performing relative to a black line, which is your 6-month target. So as we make changes, you can see how you're achieving that particular key performance indicator. Bottom center graph shows your R&R fund balance, and we're going to go through a minute some potential sensitivities to that. And perhaps most importantly, that top center graph shows the capital funding that you have in your current plans. And obviously this is going to be updated and is updated each year as part of the budget process. And as you complete additional studies or master plan updates, that information is probably one of the things that changes most frequently as part of updating this tool. And to the right of that graph is a future financing bar that shows us how much money we're going to have to borrow for those identified capital improvement expenditures. And as we have changes to the amounts of grant funding or other parameters of the model, you'll see that borrowing go up and down. So perhaps, Pat, you can maybe take us through a couple of key scenarios that we've built and share how we do some scenario comparisons.
Yeah, definitely. And so what I'm going to do is toggle in the last plan. So this is what we have come to results from our 2019 analysis. And so if I bring that in, it's going to show the last plan in green, so we can have a nice comparison of our scenarios. And just to be able to get a better viewpoint of all this, I'm going to focus on the top 3 graphs and zoom in a little bit more so that we can see just some of the nuances and the differences that go on as we change some of these scenarios. And so for today's meeting, we just wanted to tee up a couple of little toggles that illustrate how the model can help us compare pretty interactively key metrics that go on. And so one of the items that we want to consider is maybe the escalation factor that we apply to the personnel services. So we're taking the budgets and escalating it based upon inflationary cost. And currently we're running at 4% as part of our model tool. But if we wanted to escalate that and see the effects, well, I'm going to click this save button. And what that's going to do is cause our blue current plan to become our last plan. So I'll click this save button. So now they're the same. And now we can run some items to compare against the current plan and the last plan. And so we did something like increase this to 10%, so we can see some magnitude of effect and click calculate. And it will run through, and as it's calculating, it's going through all of the allocations to all the members and how a change like this would impact each member. And so it's going to think about the different capacity factors and reserve capacity amounts that each member has and come up with a solution that allocates the increases or the effects to each member. And so now you can see that what happened is as we ran through those calculations, because we're increasing our personnel services expenses, the base rate charge has increased relative to the last plan. So the blue plan now shows a higher charge than what we were previously seeing. Another item that might have an impact are chemicals, right? That's a big change on our volumetric costs. Those are variable components of our O&M. And so far, we just increased this from our current escalation assumption of 3% to maybe 15%. Again, just something that we can see some magnitude of impact, and click that calculate button. And again, this is going to go through and look at all the demands that we're forecasting in the model and how they align to each member. And then we're going to come up with a new volumetric rate per 1,000 gallons. And so it's going to iterate through, make sure it solves to the correct answer and solution, and it's going to produce a new rate per 1,000 gallons. And so you can now see that we're charging and escalating at more like 15% per year rather than about 3% of what we were seeing originally. And then if we want to see some impacts to capital, as part of the CIP, and we discussed with the authority the way that we're going to bring about the CIP on an annual basis and how projects will start to fit in, we also think about the planned funding of each of those projects. And so right now, we are bringing in grant funds as part of the funding sources that we have available to us. And so the model is currently calculating 100% of the planned grant funds that were in the CIP booklet. But if we were to reduce that and say grant funding did not come in as much as we thought it would,
I'll just say real quick, before you do that scenario, so you can see the impacts. Because this is where we're showing some examples that we've preloaded, but to the specific budget issues that Pat raised, we're going to be able to tell you the impacts of different grant funding level for the different projects. So this goes to a project-specific level, but today we're trying to illustrate the functionality of the tool that's been set up so that we can go through project by project and evaluate the impacts of grant or alternative funding sources, such as different borrowing measures.
And so exactly what happened is, because we reduced the amount of grant funding that we receive, it puts a greater burden on the amount that needs to be financed. And so you can see in the blue bars of future financing relative to the last plan of what we had originally forecasted with 100% of grants. Perhaps I can restore this back to what we had before to bring us into one of the key items that we're going to start thinking about with staff as we think about system common-wide benefit projects and how we're going to align those from a budget standpoint. And so something that's been brought up and discussed is the idea of a line of credit. And so what the line of credit's going to do is effectively have a drawdown and bring about a new way to solve or fund our capital amount. And so we just have a couple of projects that we opined or maybe thought about that could be preloaded as being part of this line of credit. And so when I toggle that on, it's going to reshuffle kind of the ways that we're currently doing things. And so it allows us again to think about how we want to model the authority. And so if I toggle that on and hit calculate, the interesting graph will be the one in the bottom right corner, because what's going to happen then is we're using the line of credit to fund for projects, and it's then pushing out the need to refund it by 2023, which is what we have set up here. And so again, this is just us going through and setting up some easy toggles for us to think about the different scenarios and how they work amongst one another. So you can see that we're taking about $1 million as part of that line of credit. It builds up to $3 million in 3 years, and then we refund it as part of our CIP plan. And the last item that we teed up is something that I think is going to be a little bit more after this model, but it's regarding the R&R and what level of R&R that we want to have in our fund balances. And so currently, the way that the model is working is based upon the setup of the authority, where we are using either the minimum of $2 million as our minimum reserve fund balance or 5% of revenues. And that gives us a line like our blue plan right here and our target line. So I'm going to click Save to kind of reset our scenarios. And then, again, not knowing what the results of the study will be, we can just have some simple, easy clicks to say, what if the new R&R capital is $3 million and more like 7%? And I can calculate that through, and we can focus on that bottom graphic in the middle, the R&R fund balance, and get an idea of what that's going to do to our fixed monthly charges per member, as well as what it's going to do to our reserve amounts. So as it iterates through, again, it's solving to make sure that it appropriately allocates to each member, and then we'll have a new plan of fixed monthly charges, as well as a new fund balance. So you can see in the blue plan, the R&R fund has jumped up to $3 million. In order to get it there, we have increased the member charges.
And so again, this is really intended to be illustrative of how we're going to analyze these issues through the budget process in terms of R&R funding requirements or different capital financing strategies, different levels of grant funds, and how we're going to be able to integrate and see the impacts of changes to your budget, whether it's operating expenses or changes in capital projects, whether it's the cost or the timing of the dollar amounts. So this is going to be an important part of the process to be able to work through those decision points and information changes pretty nimbly, rather quickly, and with a good understanding of their impacts, both in the near term and long term. And so this has been, I think, a great way that the authority's been able to look at and evaluate the impacts of different decision alternatives, whether it's been system development fees or availability fees or different funding strategies for capital. And so we're really going to envision attaching this to the budget process again this year to help examine those issues. So we love this stuff. This is kind of where we geek out. We can go through the model all day long, but I'm sure that's not what you want to do, and you have other things to accomplish. So maybe we just dial it back real quick, Pat, to the R&R funding slide for Pat, because you touched on it a little bit, but you do have those requirements in your master bond resolution for minimum renewal and replacement fund levels. But I think the real intent of the R&R sufficiency study is, you probably need to consider amounts of those minimum requirements to maintain your system for your desired level of service and asset conditions. And so when we have the findings of those studies, we'll feed those into the financial model so that we can understand the implications of that to help you understand what that would do to base charges and future capital and really budgeting as part of the process. So I don't know, Mr. Lehman, if there's anything else you want me to offer up on that, but I think that's kind of what we were intending to talk about on this slide.
Great model. I mean, it really is. Looks like it's a tremendous tool. You know, I appreciate you bringing up R&R. That's a challenge for all of us. I'm a utility director right now. It's on the wastewater side. I know it's tangential to this, but you know, we heard from the Secretary of DEP up in Tallahassee this week talking about a bill that's flowing through that we're going to have to take and within a year report on the status of all of our existing facilities and what we think our R&R is going to be, and it's going to have a major impact. So again, it's all this water quality stuff that's floating around, but yeah, this is a great tool. R&R is a major challenge, and I agree. We're going to have to figure out what is the logical number.
And how it fits into it potentially, depending on its impact.
Huge numbers.
Very much so.
Right, Mr. Lee?
Absolutely, and like I said, our youngest expansion is now over 10 years old. So you can imagine that R&R become more and more critical.
Might go through a number of the cooperative funding projects, 3 cooperative funding projects in particular that we have in with the Water Management District. One of them is the Phase 3C project up here. Let me just start at the top. This is a feasibility and routing study for the Phase 3C project. It would include looking at routing, sizing, pump station capacity, any storage requirements, really just all the nuts and bolts of how we would develop this project and the time frame and the costs as well. Now, yes? There we go. I didn't do that on mine before. That's fancy. Okay. As I said, this is what was submitted to SWIPMUD as a feasibility and routing study. It would be initiated in 2020, October 2020, so fiscal 2021. We're looking at about $625,000, $650,000 project that we would get money from SWIPMUD. So let me make sure. About $600,000 total project, and so that project has been submitted and is being considered by SWIPMUD. The next project I want to talk a little bit about is what we're calling the Southern Loop project, which is a collaboration and consolidation of Phase 2B and 2C. It is a pipeline that would connect up with our existing 42-inch Phase 2 project at Cirrus, go along Hillsborough or thereabouts, and then up to the Carlton Water Treatment Plant. This project would probably, we're expecting it to cost about $400,000 for feasibility and routing study. Same considerations of Phase 3C. We're looking at routing, sizing, timing, connections, pump stations, all of that sort of thing. This project is also intended to be coordinated with the widening of River Road, which is up here. And that widening of River Road is supposed to begin in the preliminary design anyway, would begin in 2021. And they're looking at doing design build on that. So this project, the feasibility study, would probably have to begin this year rather than in 2021 to meet that DOT schedule for this, unless the DOT schedules changes again, which has changed many times in the past. But that's what we're looking at. Again, this was submitted to the Water Management District for 50% co-funding. We're looking at this being about a 15-month project to complete.
Mr. Chairman. Mike, you're absolutely right on that River Road, but a word there, I think the speed and you pushing this ahead sooner is appropriate because it, by all bets, it will be FY 2021. And Manasota County has worked out an agreement with FDOT that they will be in charge, do the southern 1/3 of that from 41 north. So, and almost all the right-of-way is acquired, and a great percentage of the design work for the road is done.
Okay.
So, just a thought.
The third project is one that we talked about a couple of times today. That is the third reservoir at the Peace River facility. This again is a feasibility and siting study. We look at siting, sizing, operations. We'd also look at a new intake on the Peace River to service that, to help us take advantage of our new upsized permitting quantities. This is about a $1.5 million project. We expect it to take about 18 months to complete. And what you can see in this next graphic is the SWIFT funding requests that we've made for these projects. Total $1.125 million. I'm happy to tell you that discussions with the SWIFT staff this week, they have ranked all of these projects as high, which means that we have a good chance of getting funding. Certainly not a slam dunk. We have a good chance of getting funding, but as part of that, we need to show that there's a local match for their money. So we have to include these in our budget in fiscal 2021, and in some cases 2022, because they're 15 to 18 month projects. So you can see the total we've expected, we hope to get from SWIFT. We did put in a funding request to the state of Florida for $1.5 million for the reservoir project. We'll certainly know more about that later in the spring in terms of when the legislative session concludes. And then we see the authority funds, $1.375 million in total. I'll tell you that $250,000 of that total is already included in the fiscal 2020 budget. It's included in the planning component of the 2020 budget. So for fiscal 2021 and fiscal 2022, we could come up with about $1.125 million for that. So with that in mind, the question really before us in the budgeting is how we handle these kind of projects, these early stage projects, feasibility study projects in our budget. We have, as I indicated before, we have included the reservoir feasibility study and the planning assessment. We could continue that with the rest of the feasibility studies. Or we could go a different way. But what is clear in all of this is in order to get water management district funding, they've got to be included in there some way or another. So that, which is a discussion we would like to have at the board level.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, sir.
I think sometimes as a board, we need to be careful that we don't get lulled into thinking that this is seemingly so easy to consistently get SWIFT monies, and that it is an immense amount of effort on the part of our staff to get them in a position where they believe in us, agree with us, and are always there. I would not want to do anything to jeopardize that in this year's and next year's and future year's budgets if they're requiring, especially ranking us so high, so consistently, they're requesting our match and that it be demonstrated easly to them by it being in our budget. Just my thoughts on that, Mr. Chairman.
What's the total on the planning assessment annually?
The total?
Total revenue.
I don't recall exactly.
Just curious.
$200,000 was, I think about $300,000 additional, something like that.
Well, that makes it interesting.
What we'd be looking at in the plan, I'm sorry.
What's our main, I understand this is a siting and a feasibility study, and unless I'm incorrect, generally speaking, to increase our capacity, one of the members needs to request it, what, 7 years out, 10 years out?
7.
7 years out. Okay, is one of us requested a capacity increase?
The authority can also have capacity under our contract.
Okay, and so I guess what I'm saying, we're spending $3 million just for a study, which is, you know, none of these things aren't cheap. But then we're planning on moving on, or are we gonna wait for a member to ask for the capacity? I mean, what's our end game? I'm just, you know.
And by our contract, every January, all the members give us their projections for water use needs. And it looks like the 2030 to 2035 is probably the sweet spot. It's a moving target every year. The question is, if a member wants to sign on the dotted line, I want this much capacity, we have to be able to say, well, this is going to be the cost, this is the plan to do it.
So you're
this is the
thinking in
upfront
2023, a member will be asking for the added, and y'all just wanna be ahead of it, so when 2030 shows up, you're ready.
Correct.
And the reason, Pat, is it takes almost a decade
No,
to
I'm
get
just
one of these
asking,
things
I'm
designed,
just making
permitted,
sure that
constructed.
we do need the capacity.
Right.
I mean, I hate to spend $3 million on a study, and then it's outdated before someone actually thinks they need the capacity.
And this is to load it up so that in 2023, somebody doesn't ask for capacity, they will 2024, 25, if it's coming. So we need to be able to say, this is the plan, this is how much it'll cost you. This is all.
Basically, what it's asking is a member that close to asking for capacity.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Well, within our existing revenue streams, then, basically, planning study is what we've been using, for planning assessment. And that's not sufficient to meet the need, what you're telling me.
Yeah.
We talked about a workshop about a year ago, line of credit, right? Is that?
And I'm hesitating over here, but I'm not quite how to say this, but it's more certainty to receive the additional funding from both SwiftMud and the state ask sooner rather than later.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, the obvious point, we've voted repeatedly full speed ahead on the third reservoir, and I think these kinds of thoughts and actions on our part do exactly what you're suggesting, Doug. And just, there's a certainty in the part of our grant partners that, yep, they're moving on it and doing it.
And unlike some of our other projects, I think Pat already said that this one will take a little more than, typically it's 7 years to be able to build the project because of the size of the reservoir and the location and some complications with mitigation banking type credits and things like that. We need to get, if we just started it that year when someone made the demand and it had to be online in 7 years, we couldn't make it out with a project of this size and complexity.
So financial options.
Yeah.
And that's what we'll present to you at the next board meeting. Okay. Here's what we need to have in the budget. How do we collect those monies? Straight through rates, assessments, we have some carry forward or some unencumbered funds that we can apply to it. So that'll be the options.
And it's actually ends up being about a net of 1.125, I think.
Net of 1.125, and 70% of that would be needed in 2022 and 30% in 2023.
Give us the options.
And that's because, just so I'm clear, that's because we've already allocated in previous votes $250,000, which comes off that 1.375.
Correct.
And by the next board meeting, we'll have a clearer picture of those funding columns.
Okay.
So we just want to make you aware that this is what it looks like today. We'll find it. You'll be aware that the funding options will be coming to.
Getting the options and your recommendation, Mr. Lehman, to each one of us individually, one-on-ones, as you can, for the next meeting would be helpful. It would help me. Thank you, sir.
Next up is an emergency, is If you'll recall, in 2019, the board took a look at all of these policies. Utility reserve, debt service coverage, general fund, all of these were reviewed in 2019. So we're not recommending that we go back and review any of those other budget policies, but we are recommending the consideration of an emergency and disaster relief reserve for the authority. Earlier on, we approved the new insurance for our facilities. We've got about $118 million worth of insurance coverage on these facilities, and there's a 3% deductible. Now 3% goes to the part of the facilities that are damaged in like a named storm. It's not the whole thing, so you don't have to come up with 3% of 118 million. But if we had $50 million damage, we have to come up with over $1 million somewhere. And so the idea is to have an emergency and disaster relief reserve. I think most of our customers do have such a reserve, and we are throwing that out for the board to chew on, and we'll have some recommendations from the next board meeting.
Commissioners?
Yeah, well, so at the next board meeting, you're going to tell us what you think the size of that reserve would be. Okay.
I agree. I mean, we need to know.
We need to look at it.
Yeah, we really do.
Really do. I agree.
Is there any way possible to be piggybacking on the members' own insurance policies? Or do we want our own self-standing one? And I know zero about insurance, so I'm just posing a question that may have people just shaking their heads that understand this stuff, but is there any economy there? And I just complimented you. Don't make me look bad.
Typically, with insurance, you have to have a policy that's in the same name as the ownership of the asset.
Okay.
So we have extremely good coverage. Our agent, Michelle Martin, she goes to bat for us every single year. So even though we had a large increase this year, it's not anywhere close to the amount that it would be. Like Mr. Coates said, all of your counties have these emergency disaster relief reserves, especially with dealing with FEMA. They're always in a repayment. It could take 5 to 10 years to get repaid from FEMA at this point. So this is just a really good idea to ensure the security of the authority. Should we have a named storm, we can get back up and running quickly for providing water to you guys.
Obviously, it's just a matter of how much and where we're going to get the money.
Exactly.
And it doesn't have to be done all at once. It's, when we set up the utility reserve, it took years to build it up. It's not as though we're going to slam it with something astronomical up front.
Very good.
And that is it. The budget.
Okay. Next item is the Project Prairie acquisition.
There we go.
Technology's great when it works.
Need a 3-year-old. Need a 3-year-old.
There we go. Thank you.
Okay.
Is it working?
Okay, Mr. Chair, board members, this item is a discussion on the regional acquisition of the Project Prairie facilities. Those facilities that you see here, these are owned, well, some of these are owned by DeSoto County, some of the authority, I'll get into that. But this is located, this is US 17 in DeSoto County. In the foreground that you can't see would be the Walmart Distribution Center. If you look at where this is in the regional system, it's right there. Right at the confluence of our DeSoto 20-inch regional transmission main where that terminates, and right where we are beginning the installation, or we are well into the installation of our phase 1 interconnect with the city of Punta Gorda. So it sits right there where those two projects are connected. Now, water is pumped from the regional facilities, these were facilities, down the 20-inch regional transmission main into this facility. DeSoto County boosts chlorine residual, and they pump it back up into their system. The facilities were installed back in 2005, and shortly after they were installed, the authority actually acquired some of the facilities. They acquired this was an RO building. It had RO skids in it that I believe were never actually used. We acquired the aeration system here, a clear well, and we acquired a well that you can see over here, emergency supply well. So we already own part of the facilities at this site. DeSoto County owns a 5.5 million gallon a day pump station here, a 500,000 gallon storage tank, emergency generator, and of course disinfection facilities. Now these facilities, like I said, they bring water off of the regional line. In here, the DeSoto County folks boost residual, and they pump it up US 17 all the way up to 80. It also serves the Walmart Distribution Center. The facilities are strategically located, as I said, in the regional system. They're at the confluence of the DeSoto 20-inch line of the new phase 1 pipeline, but they are also located in an area where we do plan future supply facilities. For example, in our master plan, we have a 5 million gallon a day RO facility intended to be installed at some point in the future out here near the DCI facility. We've got potentially a 20 million gallon a day surface water development down at Shell Creek at some point in the future. So we're on the right side of the road here with this facility for a potential regional acquisition that would benefit everybody here. And those benefits are shown here: improved water availability for Punta Gorda and the Peace River facility. They do provide backup supply for DeSoto and serve potentially these future supplies out here. So with that in mind, we did talk to the DeSoto County utilities folks. We discussed the regional acquisition of the facilities. They agreed to explore this. We had Stantec conduct a condition assessment of the county's facilities. And Stantec folks are here if there are any detailed questions on that. Their engineers and our staff visited the site, took a look at everything out there. We looked at the as-built drawings, the operations records, maintenance records. The facilities are in good condition. They've been well maintained. And then Stantec completed evaluation of the assets out there that we don't own. The original costs for the equipment were provided by DeSoto County. Those original costs were scaled up scaled up to today's dollars using these engineering record figures. Then they were depreciated over roughly 15 years since they were built to arrive at a cost estimate. Now we did add in the cost for new VFDs into that cost estimate because the county has just replaced those. They had a license last summer, so the variable frequency drives for the motors out there are brand new. And Stantec also considered some improvements that they thought needed to be made out there. Painting of the tanks, some new meters, those sort of things in their evaluation. And they came up with a recommended acquisition cost of about $749,000 for these facilities. Now this acquisition, should we decide to pull the trigger on it, is a natural extension of that Phase 1 project. It's right where the Phase 1 project connects with the rest of the regional system. And you can see that the Phase 1 project has a $12 million budget. We got $4 million from the state, $2 million from Punta Gorda, and $6 million commitment from the Southwest Florida Water Management District to pay for it. So that's what the budget is. Projected expenditures that we're looking at for design, permitting, construction, land, $4 million of the state funds have already been expended. We've already spent that. We do expect to spend all of the $2 million from Punta Gorda. And with the current contracts that we have, the current expenditures, we expect to use about $4.8 million of the $6 million that the Water Management District has committed. So it looks like we've got some money left over. This is what the project total would look like if we didn't do anything else. Out here, we just built what we've got under contract. The remaining funds, about $1.1 million is what we're looking at. It would be about $1.2 million, but we can't include land costs in the SWIFMUD, in the budget for SWIFMUD, and so there's a calculation we have to do to back those out. So instead of $1.2 million, we got $1.07 million in remaining SWIFMUD funds. And a potential acquisition for this of $748,000, $749,000. So we still end up with about $300,000 left in this project if we were to acquire the project authority facilities as part of the Phase 1 project. We've discussed this with the Water Management District staff. They don't feel that this is a stretch at all. It would require a modification of the scope that we have with them for the Phase 1 work. I think this is, again, a natural extension of the Phase 1 project, and it's something we should consider. So that, Mr. Chair, that concludes the presentation of Project Prairie. Like I said, we've got Stantec standing by. If there are any detailed questions on it, we'll take any questions you've got.
Commissioner Mayo.
Mike, can you go to the slide you just had up previously?
Sure.
And just refresh my memory. I believe this was the project that we had extended, repeated conversations about, that the authority was needed, as my words, as a pass-through to get all these funds, but we really weren't putting any of our money into this.
Correct.
So if we move forward on this with SWIFMUD's buy-in and understanding your words, this isn't much of a stretch. Our facilities would get this acquisition, and really it would be in this bundle of money, and really wouldn't be impacting our budget at all.
Right, there, we have no capital cost associated.
That's what I meant, right?
Good point. Yeah, it looks logical to me too. I mean, it just, from a financing standpoint, from the system-wide, it's consistent with the mission, everything makes sense.
Do you need a motion today, Mike?
I can't do that on the workshop.
Okay,
Oh,
what's
that's
this
right,
one?
we're in a workshop. Mike.
I didn't even have to go, that's right.
Oh, it looks good.
That works, consensus, that works.
Anything else? You get positive head nods, I think, from everybody? Okay, our last item is Reservoir 3, mitigation model.
Just by way of introduction, I got Wade Wolfmeyer and Amber to help here. Amber Halstead to talk about the Reservoir 3 mitigation model. They've been doing work on RV Griffin for 20 years or more. And they've developed a model that helps identify what our wetland impacts and mitigation requirements might be from various sightings in the reservoir here. And they're going to walk through that with you. It's a pretty interesting model. So, with that,
One comment, Don, it would have been nice to have this 30 years ago. Just,
Right. Thanks for that introduction, Mike. Yeah, exactly. This would be was a great improvement in what used to take half a day. Now we can do a click of a button. So let me walk you through what we've done to date. And as usual, the authority was ahead of the curve, looking at wetland issues and started some preliminary studies about a year and a half ago. Just start getting a handle on the wetlands that are on the RV Griffin site nearby, and just start dusting off the old studies we did for the Reservoir 2 project. So kind of just to orient you on the right side there with the map, we've got Reservoir 2, the mitigation that went with Reservoir 2, about 1,000 acres of uplands and wetlands. We've got the 42-inch pipeline here along the south portion of RV Griffin. We also looked at the Bourne Ranch nearby because it's for sale in a large piece of adjacent property. And we had some background on that property as well. And then also note down the middle is a basin split. So all the water on this side, at least theoretically, pretty close, goes to the Maca River. Everything on this side of this dash line goes to the Peace River. And that's important because impacts in the Peace Basin would need to be wetland impacts would be mitigated in the Peace Basin. Impacts in the Maca Basin would be impacted, would be mitigated in the Maca. That's gotten a little more stringent. You can see that Reservoir 2 kind of splits the difference, and so did the mitigation. But that's really tightened up, cumulative impacts, and those rules have tightened up over time. So what we did was we dusted off the old data layer. We had a lot of information from Reservoir 2 permitting, but there was a lot of the southern part of the site that was never mapped, so we remapped all the wetlands. Scored them using the UMAM, and that's just a way of putting them all in the same currency. One takeaway from today is that not all wetlands are the same. I think in the past it was all about wetland impact, avoiding impacts, acres, and we've gotten a lot more sophisticated, and there's more considerations than just acreage. There's quality and type and things that the model kind of takes into account. I'll explain that just shortly here.
Wait, excuse me for a
Yes.
second. Acronyms are great.
Okay.
I happen to know the UM, but if you could share with the audience
Sure.
what the UM.
Sure, yeah. UMAM is Uniform Mitigation Assessment Methodology. And it's basically if you think about in grade school, that's sort of the teacher's template for grading that describes a pristine wetland that you compare all other wetlands to. You end up with a grade or a score between 0 and 1, sort of like it's like high school or middle school. But I'll get into that a little bit in just a minute too. But the reason for doing all getting this wetland inventory and scoring the wetlands was really to be able to apply a footprint and instantaneously, pretty quickly, determine ultimately the cost, but in the interim, until we got the cost worked out, the types and numbers of credits or debits needed for universal. And so that'll be useful in permitting going forward as we get refined data and we can show the agencies how we minimize and avoided impact. But it's also helpful for determining wetland costs. So the UMAM, again, this is just putting it in a common currency, and instead of looking at acres, now we look at the quality, and really, it's real simply, it's 3 categories. Location, landscape is what surrounds the wetland. A wetland in a pasture scores lower than a wetland in the pine flatwoods. Water environment, that's how well does a wetland hold its water. A wetland with a ditch scores lower than a wetland without a ditch. Community structure is all things vegetation. Again, a grazed wetland in a pasture, cattle trample will score lower than a intact wetland that's in the flatwoods again. And so the way you calculate is to take the UMAM score, your grade score, times the acres, and you get debits. So for example, a pretty nice wetland, a 70% wetland, times 1 acre impact is 0.7 debits. So you can see that a poor quality wetland would be less debits and a high quality would be more. That's all important because that ties directly into the amount of credit needed. And again, not all wetlands are the same. And where you place the footprint will create different costs and different challenges depending on the types of wetlands and the costs of them. So for example, here on the map, the highest quality wetlands there are kind of in the green. They're in the mitigation areas. They've been fully restored and all the hydrology's been repaired. You've got some nice wetlands over in that are in the intact habitats. When you get into the pastures and drained wetlands, you get more cattle interaction and more degradation. And so generally lower quality wetlands around the pastures. And just of note, the Bourne Ranch had generally poor quality wetlands with a lot of activity, agricultural activity in the southern part of the site. So that gives you kind of a gradient of high to low. One thing of note, all this red that's around the mitigation wetlands is all the upland buffers that were required. And though they're not low quality, they're shown in red because they generated a small amount of credit, and then some impacting over top of those would be a similar small amount of credit that would be required to offset. So, again, to build this model where we can just kind of take a cookie cutter and quickly tell what the impact or cost is, the inputs were the wetlands on the left-hand side here. The score, the type is very important, whether they're forested or non-forested, and their size. So we approximate their size and try to capture everything we could find. The second's the basin. So you've got to sort of split this into two groups. Impacts that by forested and non-forested in each basin. So there's really 4 types of credits here we're talking about. Each that is specifically offset in a different way. And then finally, on the right, the reservoir footprint, you plop that down, and again, instead of hours or half a day, we can quickly spit out, much like the Stantec model, but not as sophisticated, a impact in credits or boiled down, or eventually dollars. So Amber's going to walk through quickly. Amber is our biologist / GIS analyst and is the mastermind of all this stuff that I don't quite understand.
So the way the model works is it starts with any reservoir footprint on either RV Griffin or Bourne Ranch that you could draw out, and then it has an optional buffer. So if you want to look at impacts within any given distance, like say the footprint is the inside of the reservoir and you have a berm on the outside, so you want to put a buffer around this footprint, you could do that. For all of the examples we used today, we didn't use a buffer, but it is an option. And then it kind of acts as a cookie cutter on the wetlands to show your primary impact area, the area with the hatching. And then it looks at secondary impacts. So currently the model decides if a wetland is 75% or more impacted by your reservoir footprint, it will account the rest of that wetland as a secondary impact and include it in your total impact area. That's also optional. We could change the percentage if we want, but for everything we looked at today, we used a 75% as a good rule of thumb. And then it calculates, using the UMAM score we created earlier, the areas of wetland impacts in that basin line. It creates a table summary showing the total area impacted in each basin by type, and then tells you the debits that would generate. And we can also use it to calculate the cost of debits once we have a agreed upon price per credit for each of those basins.
You want to keep going or pause for any questions?
Any questions or comments?
So we've got a few examples that we this is something we did a little workshop with the authority folks, and they thought it was very helpful to just kind of look at plopping around some footprints and see what happens and what's the kind of sensitivity. So we took these are all about 1,000 acres. Took a 1,000-acre footprint, which is larger than the existing reservoir. I think it's 760, but a similar kind of shape, and just set it down wherever it would fit. So the takeaway on this one is if it was put on the mitigation site adjacent to the reservoir, those are really green, high-quality wetlands, and all the buffers around them. If you notice at the bottom of the table, on this example, there's 340 acres of upland. Typically, you don't offset, but because it was part of the mitigation, I think you would have to offset that. So these are high-quality wetlands and a lot of credits. So there's a total of 300 credits that we calculate on this footprint. The mitigation cost estimate there at the bottom, that's strictly just a 50 to 90% of current retail credit price in the area. It's been applied to both all types and banks. And the reason there's such a broad range is because there's still a lot of, I think, uncertainty. And this is for credits. This is not do-it-yourself mitigation. That would be a different analysis. This is just to give you kind of an idea. But the reason for the broad range is typically when you see a large purchase with no contingencies and current year or right away, you can see a pretty large discount from market. But if it's something that gets protracted over 5 years from now, or because the reservoir plan's going to go out in the future, you might see a different price for that with more uncertainty or time. Credits, just like all the water rates and everything that we've seen, kind of inflates over time. The rules get harder over time. The amount of endowment the banks are holding is changing and evolving. And so they tend to go up as well, so in the outer years. And it's just a way to predict, kind of using today's prices, some kind of range. So anyway, the takeaway on the first input is that would be pretty costly. A lot of credits here, and also it could add some time and complexity to unwind the old mitigation that has a conservation easement on it. It's not unheard of, but it would be pretty difficult. So second footprint, we looked the same size and shape, 1,000 acres. We kind of plopped it down on the lowest quality wetlands that are around the most amount of pasture, and sure you end up with quite a few, almost half as many debits. Again, the acres may not be that different, but because of the quality, these are C and D grade wetlands, the quality is much lower. So, the mitigation cost is a fraction or almost half of the other site, but there is the cost of possibly relocating the pipeline. We have just rough approximate cost of $4 million there to reroute that. So it's just another consideration to think about if there was a reservoir down south. But all in all, this is, I think, 25 or 30% less than the footprint that was in the mitigation area adjacent. Again, 50 to 90% of retail prices. So we said, well, let's look at a similar size and shape just above the pipeline, stay out of that that impact. And though it has a little more impact and debits, it's actually about 10-15% less expensive than crossing the pipeline. So it just kind of gives you an idea of some of the analysis that's going to be done in regard to the footprint. Of course, this all has to be matched with engineering concerns and height and width and shape and perimeter. But it shows you how this tool can quickly crunch out the numbers and give you some good data. If you look at last one here, footprint 4, same area, but we've kind of refined the shape. I'm not sure it's an area you'd love to build it this way, but just with a little tweaking, same size and same general area, we cut another 15% off the potential mitigation. So there's a pretty good range of costs you could expect, but this tool, once those costs are known, could quickly deliver some a cost estimate. Because behind the scenes, it's looking at the 4 types of wetlands that the forested, non-forested in both basins. So it's a pretty quick way of looking at some cost estimates. So in summary, when looking at the project area that we did, RV Griffin and Bourne Ranch, siting a reservoir has some physical constraints. Obviously, the existing reservoir, the ASR well field, that there's the pipeline that we talked about down south, and that is something to consider. There's the boundaries. Obviously, it's triangular, and you've got limited area on site, and some constraints up on the Bourne Ranch site is not very wide. And then we kind of looked at some cost drivers. So wetland quality and type, the grades of the wetlands are critical. Forested and non-forested can have some differential. And then the third one down impact basin, that could be important. Costs can be very differential between basins, and so that might be a driver to squeeze the reservoir slightly east or west. And if you're going off-site out of this area, of course, you got to look at land acquisition costs. Whether you're looking to site the reservoir or site mitigation, that's something that would definitely be considered. And also the on-site mitigation area seems to be pretty costly and challenging area to site, but again, anything's possible. So that's all we had today.
I guess the availability of banks in both basins. Is there plenty of Because I am assuming the bank has to be a similar wetland type thing.
Right, generally forested, non-forested is where they break it down. I mean, if you have something that's drastically different. The banks that exist, or are being built are of the same type and are nearby. And as far as capacity, it depends on the footprint. We've seen credits from 300 to 150, just these footprint, and 1,000 acres may be too large. But for something around this, 1,000 acres, there is capacity either existing or planned in the near future that would come online well within the horizon of this project that are in the works now.
As an option. I'm sure we'll have plenty of availability out there. Well, obviously, the importance of that consultant selection, so, commissioners, relative to site planning and feasibility study. Major component. No comments? Thank you. Good. All right. Board member comments?
can see that regional priorities stay within their strategic plan. But on the next slide, this is what they're inserting into their 5-year strategic plan, specifically to assist this authority with 21 MGD of advanced water supply. So I just wanted to make you aware of that our partner with Squidwood, it's all embedded into the strategic plan that was approved, so when they print their new strategic plan, that will be part.
Very good.
One other item that I'd like to bring that, back in 2016-17, Mr. Manson brought before this board the Allen litigation issue that there was litigation going on with Allen companies for price collusion. We had an attorney that came to us, that didn't work out. There was a lot of class action around the country, and we had all kinds of friendly attorneys, but Pam Bondi at the state, when she was still Attorney General, decided the state of Florida would take it upon themselves to do their own litigation. And Ann was involved by trying to cobble together a lot of the invoices and finances, and this is back from the late 90s and the early 2000s. And lo and behold, right about Christmas time, the state sent us a check for over $500,000 that the case had been settled to the state, and that was our share of the state money. So kudos to all the attorneys, to Ann for cobbling it together. And
Well, I just have to say that one of the reasons, I'll be careful on do this, because it's all good for Ann, but not for some of the other entities. The amount of information that was put together was what garnered us a larger piece of that pie than you would think for the size of the entity. So congratulations, you put together a package, they put it in there, everything we had was supported, so we managed to get the full amount. And it was a victory for the authority, and it was fantastic that the state decided to do that. You didn't lose a third of what would have come out, which would have been the standard attorney agreement to do it.
so bottom line, when we talk about today, some of the budget items that we're going to bring forward, we do have, I guess you'd call it a windfall that can help with some of those costs.
Very good. Very, very good. Okay, routine status reports, commissioners, if you see them on the list. Any questions, any comments on that? Okay. We finished board member comments, unless you all have something else you want to comment on. Good. Public comments. Again, 3 minutes on any authority-related subject. I'll hold to 3 minutes. Rachel, if you'll help me with a 30-second warning, and we'll need to fill out a card, and again, speak to the board as a whole, not to individual members, and there'll be no discussion at this point. First, I've got Cynthia Compton. Good morning.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you? Still morning.
They say there's separation of church and state. I don't believe in that. I believe that God and government have the perfect marriage, and so given that we are talking about one of his resources today, I believe he belongs in this room. He has provided this perfect, amazing resource that we need to survive off of. We cannot survive without water. He made it perfect for our bodies to digest without harm. And you guys, I mean, all this conversation and everything, very impressive. All the things that we do to our water to make it what it is today, which I can't even drink my tap water. That's not good. I cannot, and Mr. Doherty knows this from the Charlotte County Commission meetings, I can't even bathe my dog in tap water because his skin swells up. It just does terrible things to his skin. As soon as I quit bathing him, he's fine. Bleeds all over the place and stuff just from the creases in his skin when I use tap water on him. This natural resource that he created, and we continue to put all these chemicals in it, whether it is by the state, by the county, by Mosaic, by the fertilizers, by whatever resource that is damaging our water. think it's very interesting how God created our bodies to be in a relationship with the earth through plants, air, water. And just sitting here listening to all this, I thought it was pretty cool that it became really clear to me that maybe he did that intentionally, that we would be good stewards of the things that he provided us. The air, as they throw chemtrails everywhere, not particular to this meeting, but everything that he gave us for free, and we destroy it. I pay one person living in my little house, little tutu, me and my dog, I pay an average of $85 a month.
30 seconds.
Okay. There is a scripture, and it's a pinch of leaven, swells up the whole loaf. Revelation 11:18, he talks about what will happen to those who destroy the earth. Just to take into consideration. Y'all put yourself in a very challenging position to be in control. But thank you for your time. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next, Michael Zarzano wants to speak to water threats. Morning again, sir.
Good morning, commissioners and water people. Let me appeal to your logic and your morality regarding the picture, the big picture of water. You're all water people. Your industry is related to water. So I'm here to address the big picture. We now understand that in the state of Florida, we have caused the destruction of our natural environment in the water due to damming of Lake Okeechobee. We collect all these nutrients from Ocala down through Orlando and the chain of lakes, and they get caught up in the Lake Oak. And then we force them out, St. Lucie and the Caloosahatchee River. This has happened because of our federal government has come to help us. You've all heard it. I'm here from the government. We're here to help. Well, they have done the opposite. They have destroyed God's natural way of filtering the water. Decades of mistakes and neglect can't continue. It's time that your moral senses and your common sense and your logic, commissioners, be engaged. Florida is a very unique state. It's very narrow, and we have the water aquifer right in the middle. And we're allowing Mosaic to do one of the most destructive acts against nature that man has ever done. And that is strip mine in a very shallow, pristine aquifer. This defies logic. Nobody with common sense and decency and any form of morality would allow such a destructive practice to a special, very special state like Florida. Florida is not the only state where phosphate can be mined. On top of that, it's a state that's prone to sinkholes. We're building these massive tanks of pollution, 400 feet high almost. Did you know the highest point in the state of Florida is now a gypstack? A stack of contaminated soil and acid water. We're also a state that gets frequented by hurricanes. It's already been proven that hurricanes, when they visit Central and South Florida, they destroy gypstacks, which leak radioactive water.
30 seconds, sir.
These gypstacks are filled with acidic water. Guess what the acidic water does to the limestone that is underneath the gypstack? It compromises it. It allows cracks. And that's what happened in 2016 when a sinkhole opened up and a massive amount of millions, 215 million gallons of water fell into the aquifer. It's time that you county commissioners listen to the cries of the people.
Your time is up, sir.
And give it back to the people.
Thank you very much.
Not corporate America.
Your time is up. Thank you. Next, Tim Ritchie.
I'd like to thank everybody. What a wonderful meeting. Great information today. Here I have a primary report of air sampling particles. This was a pilot study in Lee County from fall 2018 to winter 2019. Michael Parsons. We have a serious problem in Florida with our water. Peace River and the Manasota River in Charlotte Harbor are the greatest assets in Charlotte County. But not only in our county, they are some of the jewels of Florida. Dr. Larry Grant, a brilliant professor from the University of Miami. Dr. Paul Cox, brilliant scientist, brain chemistry labs, Jackson Hole, Wyoming. They have done studies on the PRMRWSA, the toxins in the air that we are all breathing. They acerbate ALS. They acerbate terrible diseases to us. Cyanobacteria, we've heard all about it. Mosaic takes the cyanobacteria, its powder form, sprinkle it out in each of their CSAs, place settling areas in chip stacks. Why? To eat the heavy metals. Attached to that phosphate rock is radium. 226, everybody. 228 uranium cadmiums. I have asked, I have requested numerous times that our water is tested specifically for gross alpha particles. I'm not kidding around. We want the blended water tested that's going down our river. 2.6 million gallons every day. I have my briefcase. I have them permitted. 78 million gallons per month in our watershed. The gypstack is still leaking in Mosaic Bartow South. Directly across the street is the Mosaic Bartow chemical plant.
30 seconds, sir.
Next to it is the Bartow gypstack. You go that way 10 minutes, the Mosaic Green Bay gypstack. You go another 10 minutes, the Mosaic New Wales gypstack. Our river is under chemical attack by Mosaic fertilizer. I urge everyone, this is for our kids, our grandkids, your great-grandkids. This is the legacy of our Florida. I want to thank all of you for your time. I am available to anybody. My commissioners will tell you.
Your time is up, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Tim. Okay, that completes our public comments. Have no more cards? Rachel, right? Okay. Announcements. March 27th, 2020 at 11:30 a.m. is the Friends of the Peace Water Incorporated Annual Barbecue. Enjoy it every year. Right down here at the facility. Our next meeting will be on Monday, March 30th, 2020 at 9:30 a.m. in Sarasota County at the Administration Center. Commissioner, I thank you for moving that date. I'll be going up to Washington the next day, so it's appreciated. All right, I don't think we have any other business. Ms. Manson, we're good? This meeting is adjourned.
Lunch, Pat.
No, yeah, lunch.
Lunch is served. Everybody's invited to stay for lunch. It's ready to go outside, so help yourself.
You're not doing one. Only thing is, hers is brand new and worth $1,000. Yeah.